the question is then, how do I go about actually researching? Where do I find sources? Where do I find articles? How do I know if they're good or not? So we'll start with the basics. There's two major types of scholarly sources. There's actually more than two. There are a variety of different other options, but the two main ones that you're likely to run into are academic books and academic journal articles. Now, both go through a process of peer review. So that means that other scholars are reading that article or reading that book in advance to offer comments. And it's usually blind review, meaning that it is completely anonymous. So you're able to be really, really tough on the article to make sure that it doesn't go through and get published if it shouldn't. So somebody else or actually usually many people in the academic world are also taking a look at these to check to make sure that they're good before they're actually published. But largely what you'll run into are books, which can be edited books or a monograph, and journal articles. So here's an example. Here's an example of a university press. So most academic books will be coming from a university press or another scholarly press like Routledge, for example. The example I gave here, edited book that I was involved with, is from Routledge. And again, it's going to go through some form of peer review and then be published by this university press or academic publisher. The other example is an academic journal article, which is in an academic journal. So this is an example of the Canadian Journal of Political Science. And so the process when I submit a journal article would be that I submit it, the editor would then choose whether or not to send it out for review. If it gets sent for review, then it goes out to anywhere between 2 and 4 other scholars who don't know that I wrote it, and I don't know who they are, and they go at it, and they give all of their criticisms and give recommendations to the editor of whether it should be published or not. If it's relatively positive, then the editor will choose perhaps to ask the author to revise it based on those comments and resubmit it again. It can go through this process for a number of rounds, or in a large portion, usually in the good journals, this is like the vast majority of articles, they'll be rejected, and it's a really tough process. So especially in the good, really good journals, it's hard to get published because there's a very rigorous process of peer review that makes sure that nothing doesn't get caught before it's published, and that's why this would be a high quality scholarly source. So there's some guidelines I found I quite like from here, University of Illinois, I believe, that have how to determine really if a source is good, a reputable scholarly source. 5 things to think about. So the author, usually it's going to be an academic in the field. They should have credentials in the area that they are writing about. It should be a publisher that is a reputable academic institution or scholarly organization, a reputable journal. And you can generally figure that out by taking a look at their policies and procedures, who the audience is supposed to be for this particular piece of work. So academics will write blog posts and they will write op-eds. That doesn't make it a scholarly source. And the content, so are there citations, is the information and what is being claimed, well documented, well supported with evidence. And then also to take a look at the date. There's some really good, base works in the field that are important, that might be from the 1960s, but if you're getting everything from the 1960s, that might be a challenge. Okay, so where do you start? So let's set up a hypothetical research question. I am interested in knowing whether natural resource wealth diminishes the quality of democracy in a country. Now, why is this? Because I read this excellent piece from one of my classes called "Does Oil Hinder Democracy" by Michael Ross, and he argues that and actually demonstrates that when you have a country that's wealth is coming from natural resources, especially oil, what happens is that wealth is not being diffused to the public, and what ultimately might end up happening is that the effects of more of a better economy really aren't going to be aren't going to translate into a better quality of democracy because people won't be participating in the same way that they might if wealth is coming in more diffuse, and also that natural resource wealth can help autocrats continue to rule. Okay, so there's a variety of reasons, but point being, you read this really cool article, you're like, I'd like to study the relationship between natural resource wealth and democracy. Okay. So the first place I would go is to take a look at his bibliography and his citations. I call this bibliography mining, and that's a really good way of going through and seeing, well, what is it that this author is citing, because that's probably going to be some a good place to start. So, for example, I might be looking at other things written in this academic journal and think particularly academic books that might be of interest. But then, of course, we don't always start with a good article. And also, you'll notice that this article is from 2001, and probably lots of things have been written on this subject since 2001. So that's where you might go more to a database or search. So I use Google Scholar. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it, but that's just how I do it. So I might use some keyword searching. So natural resources, democracy, wealth. Okay. So let's look at some of these studies. Ooh, comparative political studies. That's a good one. Okay, so I look here, and okay, so I'm just going to explain what I'm doing here. So I'm actually looking right here. It'll say what journal it is, and if it is an academic journal or whether it's somewhere else. Sometimes oftentimes books aren't included here, which is a shame. So this is not a source that's going, or a way to go about it that's always going to work. But let's say I find this one interesting. What I'll do is I'll read the abstract, and I'll try to make sure that this is actually capturing the sort of question that I'm interested in. In this case, it's a yes. So what I'm going to do then is actually find this article and read it and see if it's useful. So how do I actually find it? Let's just copy the title here. So I will go over to the library tab on my Moodle, which you should all be enrolled in, we hope, and go down to the Easy Proxy. It isn't going to ask me for my login because I already logged in. I just wanted to check if it worked. And then I'll use the discovery tool, which is really good for academic journal articles at RMC. So I'm going to copy and paste the title and wait as it searches. Here we go. So here's the article that we are looking for. And it should allow me to just download the PDF. Et voila. Okay. So then I read this and I'm like, yep, this is exactly what I'm trying to get at. Like, this is addressing these issues. I'm reading their bibliography, and then I'll take note. Oh, I'd really like to read, for example, this Humphreys article. Let's find out. No, that's on Civil War. But let's say I'm interested in finding a specific article. I'll go down to the bibliography, and I will, for example, Ross. Look at, he has an updated article about what have we learned about the resource curse. That might be interesting. So I will go back and see if I can find that article. So this is what I call bibliography mining. I read the lit reviews of good reputable sources, and they lead me to other good reputable sources. Here we go. Linked full text, perfect. Anyway, so that's how I usually go about doing it. The best spot is a really good source that somebody has recommended to you. If you don't have that, then you might go do some keyword searching. Let's just go back to that keyword search that we had. You can also check what time. So if I really want to make sure I have the most recent stuff, I can say I just want stuff from 2020. Let's say I found one, I guess I clicked on this earlier, and this is a journal I'm not familiar with, which for you guys probably is going to be a lot of journals that you're not familiar with. Journal of Economic and Administrative Sciences. So how do I know if that's reputable or not? Usually you can look up about a journal, their policy, who's the editor, are they from reputable universities? Okay, so it's the journal International, okay, peer-reviewed research, perfect. It's the area of business administration. See who's on the editorial team. Okay, so she's a professor at a university. She holds a post, fantastic. And so, I'm less familiar with this source, but because I'm able to look it up, and then I can also look up the authors. I don't know how to get back to where I was, but there we go. I can also look up these authors and see who they are. So I'm noticing that they're at a university. I could look them up to ensure that so they're writing in a business journal and they're from the School of Economics and Management. And it's a recent publication. So I might take a look at this study as well. And then through that process of finding good studies and then looking at what they have been citing, that's usually the best way to find interesting resources. So just one final note, if you can't find something here, this is where I would recommend talking to a librarian. Let's see if we can go back all the way back to the Moodle. They have office hours. They're always usually really helpful. And let's keep going back. So they have Zoom and chat options. And so just ask, I really want to find this particular article. Here's what I've tried. Here's what I can't find. They might have a better way of going about finding it. So this is a great resource. I actually hadn't realized that it was there until recently. But that's a really good way then to find those scholarly sources you need in order to write a literature review.